Hello and welcome to the video. In this video we're going to be taking a look at this model here. Actually, I've got a couple of quadcopters from Awesome, and both of these came from gearbest.com. I'll put a link in the description. The one we're interested in today is this one here, the Awesome F100. Now this is a little compact quad, runs on a 2S battery, has FPV system attached, F3 based flight controller, running Omnibus software, integrated on-screen display, and 4-in-1 BL Heli S ESCs as well, and lots of options for FPV channels and bands as well. So if I just show you how it comes in the box before we get into the nitty-gritty, and I'll show you how this thing flies. When you open the box, first of all you're going to see the manual. The manual itself is okay, it has all the basic information in here, but what I'll do, I'll talk about how you bind it, because I struggled a little bit. You do get a cable in here to have your own receiver, and there are lots and lots of options. Again, I'll show you how to set the channel and band for the FPV transmitter. That's a bit tricky too. You get a set of props and a spare set. They don't come pre-installed. You get some optional protectors for the blades. You get a little 500 milliamp hour 2S battery. You get the little cable here that you can use if you want to connect it to your own radio receiver, and you get the set of screws that you need to mount the props onto the motors. So here's the main event. Here's the F100, and when it first comes out of the packaging it does look very impressive indeed. There's the flight controller in the middle and the ESCs. You can see the ESCs actually plug into the motors using little connectors. JST power, elastic band at the bottom to keep the battery in place. So that's just going to slide into here. In fact, when I'm flying this, I'm actually tucking each of the cables in the band as well, just to keep them out of the way. In a bad crash it will still get ejected, so you might want to put a little bit of Velcro behind it. We have our FPV video camera at the front and a dipole antenna at the back. The motors themselves, a little 1103 7500 kV units, branded as Awesome, and it's actually using a real FrSky XM receiver, and we have our little USB connector here on the side so we can plug it in, and we'll do that in a second and check how everything's working. But hopefully as I'm kind of turning this around you're getting a similar impression to me, and that actually looks like a pretty nice model and it seems really well made. So let's get the props on and start going through the setup. Be careful which way around you're going to install the props. The props, absolutely standard settings here for clean flight and Betaflight, so copy what I'm doing here. I found the easiest way to do this, to fit them, was to make sure that I've got the right prop in the right place, but then push them home. They're quite a tight fit over the shaft of these little motors, and then turn the prop around until you can see it line up with the threaded holes in the top of the motor through the prop itself. Once you've got that done, then you'll get it on without too much problem at all. I've had a number of crashes with these props and I've not had an issue, to be honest. I haven't broken any yet, even without the prop guards installed. To install those optional prop guards, what you'd have to do is take out the 4 screws that hold the motor into place and then replace the existing little feet here that are in each of the corners with those prop guards that also include a set of feet. I haven't installed those personally as I've been flying this outside. You could fly this in a sports hall or something like that, but this is a little bit too aggressive, bit too powerful for flying indoor around the living room. So let me just very quickly show you how to do the binding. Now I had to take the top of the model off here. Now that's the XM receiver, and just to the left of where the antenna is coming out of the top of the unit, that's where you have to press to enter into bind mode, and it's standard FrSky binding. You can also get versions of this that don't come with a receiver, so you can add your own micro receiver in place. The other quick tip I'd say is, while I've got the top off, I'll show you here, this little button on the right hand side is the one that you press to set the band and the frequency that you want to use for the FPV transmitter. The onboard transmitter is 25 milliwatts, but gives you really nice range. Now the way it works is you have to press and hold the button, and that sets you into the band frequency first. In the manual it shows you the graphic of how all the bands work. I want to put mine onto Fat Shark channel 1, band F, channel 1, so I need to press the button and hold it until the red light is flashing, then need to press the button briefly until the red light is flashing 4 times, which means I'm in band F, and then press and hold it again so that the blue light starts flashing, and then the number of flashes there lets you know the channel. Briefly press it until you've got the right number that you need for your FPV transmitter, and then press and hold it again. Screws that hold the top in place are actually machine threaded screws, and they're going into these aluminium side pieces, so you can take and replace the top quite a lot. But I'd prefer to have these LEDs on the side that was a little bit more visible, so in the field, if you do need to change it, if you're flying with a PAL, then it would have been a little bit easier. This model does have an integrated Betaflight on-screen display. I'll show you how that's configured in a minute, and when we take it out and fly, you'll see how it performs. And by default, the mode setup in Betaflight is configured so that the on-screen display is actually turned off. So I'll show you that in a moment, but you can see here we can go into the Betaflight menu, we can change all the settings. Unfortunately, the video transmitter in this little model isn't settable via those on-screen display menu pieces here in Betaflight. You've got to use that little button and those two hidden lights to get it onto the right channel and band. So let me very quickly show you in Betaflight how it's come configured. I didn't have to change an awful lot on this little model to get it flying very well. So first of all, here's a ports configuration. Then we have the main configuration page. Accelerometer's turned on, everything else is turned off. It's set for a serial receiver for S-Bus, which is that little FrSky XM receiver that's supplied with the model. LED strips turned on, so is the on-screen display. The PIDs have been tweaked a little bit on this model, and it does fly surprisingly well out the box, and you'll see that in a moment. Nothing particularly special in the receiver settings. Default mode settings on this needed some tweaking in my humble opinion. Auxiliary 2 on the radio is being used for arming. Auxiliary 1 was set for the angle in low position, horizon in the middle position, or rate in the top position. That's how I tend to have most of my quad set up actually, so that kind of worked for me. But air mode wasn't turned on. There was a mode set for beeper, which is a little bit odd because there isn't actually a beeper installed on this model. There are pads at the side of one of the PCBs that you can install a buzzer onto, but I'll mention that again at the end of the video. And there's also a setting here for the LEDs and the on-screen display as well. Personally, I'd get rid of the settings for the beeper, the LEDs and the on-screen display stuff if you're not going to be using it. It'll just mean it'll confuse you, and you'll find that your on-screen display won't be there by default. That's how it's set up by default for the on-screen display. While we're talking about that, the LEDs only has 2 at the back, which is all it can really fit on. And then finally, if we just check how it's setting, it's running an Omnibus Target version 3.1.7 of Betaflight. Last thing to mention is it does have a VBAT on here, so it is measuring the battery voltage, so you can keep an eye on what it's like to actually fly. So, talking about flying, what's it actually like? So this is some onboard footage taken on a reasonably overcast day, just zooming around. Now the PIDs and the settings by default are pretty good. On the battery you will get about 5 minutes flight time if you're really hooking it around, but you might be able to stretch it to 5.5, 6 minutes absolute maximum before you have to bring it in. The camera itself works very well considering its size, and that little 25 milliwatt transmitter, even though it's a simple little dipole whip antenna, worked really good too. Now I cheated a little bit here. I was using one of the Menace RC Bandicoot antennas on my goggles with the diversity setup, and that was giving me some fantastic range. So I was actually getting out quite a fair distance here on the 25 milliwatt video transmitter and experiencing very little breakup indeed. But the image here is good enough, even in these very low overcast conditions, for me to easily see the goalposts and play around and shoot around the field. Unfortunately, you will notice that I did pick up a little bit of moisture on the lens as I kind of bounced into the grass, but hopefully you can still see what a pretty good job the camera's doing here and how good the tune is out of the box. So what's the model like? Well, I like the way that the frame and the build are put together. It is a nice frame. It has a smaller brother, and I'll be looking at that in about another week. The electronics work well, and there's some really nice choices here. The way the ESCs work really nicely, the fact that the way the motor's plugged into the ESCs mean that if you did unfortunately break or destroy a motor and you can get a spare, then you aren't going to have to reach for the soldering iron. It's there with a plug. The PID tuning out the box is pretty good. I'll probably increase the RC rates. That might be also partly due to the fact running 2S LiPo power, but that's more about that in a second. The flips and rolls are nice, but they could be a little bit faster for me. They felt a little bit lazy. The camera itself, the performance from the camera, considering it's got such a lens, some of these cameras on these really small models, you can really feel the compromises that have been made. On this one, I've been pretty impressed in both very bright light, but also, as the video that we just saw, on those kind of overcast, rubbishy days. I like the fact that you've got a full set of spare props. Again, so far I haven't managed to break any yet. This thing's had quite a few tumbles in the grass, and it's come away from every single one of those little hiccups without a dent. Do remember about those little FPV channel band LEDs are hidden. It isn't clear in the manuals which ones you're supposed to be looking at, those ones at the back underneath the cover. There is a red and blue LED on the side of the model that, when you're not sure what you're doing, you'll absolutely think are going to be for setting your FPV bits and pieces. And you might be like me and spend a good minute trying to figure out why those aren't flashing when you press and hold the change button on the right hand side of the craft. Some pilots I know have been able to get the receiver out of the side of the model to press that little bind button by where the antenna is on that XM receiver, so I had to remove the top. So be aware of that, you might have to do it, and actually while you've got that top off the model, it's probably a good idea to set your FPV band and frequency while you've got a clear view of those LEDs too. It does have that linear antenna. Does save quite a bit of weight putting a linear antenna on this, but what I'd recommend is if you're going to fly little models like this, get yourself one of those Menace RC Bandicoot antennas, because I had a fantastic performance, and in fact I did have to come back and double check that it wasn't a 200 milliwatt transmitter because the picture that I was getting was so nice. This model absolutely needs a buzzer installed. If you crash in any particular length of grass, it will disappear, and it's only got those two little lights at the back, and that's your lot. I think a little piezoelectric buzzer somewhere on the frame would have been a really nice touch. They've gone to the trouble of setting a buzzer mode in there, so I must have been thinking about it at some point, but they haven't gone through and actually put one on the model. Now you could solder that onto the side of the model itself, and I'd recommend if you're going to be flying anywhere where you might come down in longer grass or a bush or something like that, do yourself a favour, put a buzzer on it, because otherwise you'll never find it if it comes down and you didn't have eyes on it when it went in. It's 2S power here for the LiPo. I wouldn't recommend putting up to 3S, but the 2S power is okay for this model. Punch outs are fine, it'll do flips and rolls, it'll do acrobatic. It isn't an out and out speed machine, and that 2S power also means that you won't be able to put any kind of action camera on here, but that's not really what this model is all about. And the last thing to keep in mind is you only get one battery with the model, and that'll give you about 5 to 6 minutes of flight time depending on how you fly it. So for me, this is a very nice model. It's very capable, fun to fly, camera's good, flies really well, has Betaflight on there, has an on-screen display. If you can cope with the fact you'll probably have to find a piezoelectric buzzer and pop one on the side if you're going to fly on anything but in the back garden, and you're only going to get 5 minutes of flight time when you're flying it like you stole it, then definitely worth a look. Thank you for taking the time to watch that video, and particularly for watching right to the very end. We try and release a video on Tuesday and Friday, and sometimes we'll release 1 or 2 extra ones in a week as well. All of the videos on the channel are organised into easy to use playlists, so do have a look in there, because if you're interested in a subject, we organise all the videos on that subject so you can find them easily all together in one place. If you like what we're doing, then please like and subscribe and tell others about the channel so they can come and join as well. We're available in all of the usual social media places, particularly in places like Instagram, Twitter, and we also share all of our 3D designs on Thingiverse.